and the meditation of mind, heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our redeemer. And it's in his name, which is his authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Welcome to everybody, whether you're joining us on TikTok, whether you're joining us on YouTube, if you're watching this live, watching this later on, etc. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. We are doing well. Thanks for asking. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, of being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Thank you for joining us again, and we appreciate you. Getting ready for our trip next week. We're going to be in the Detroit, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Holy Convocation. We're excited. We're excited. Hopefully everybody will be able to attend. Hopefully everybody makes it there safely. We'll have some of it that'll be on Zoom and recorded, and some for the Patreon family as well. So we look forward to that going down as well. So thank you so much, and we appreciate you. We honor you. We look forward to you guys being there with us. We thank you so much for you taking time out to be with us, and we appreciate you. We appreciate you. We appreciate you very much so indeed. So thank you so much once again for joining us. We give all praise and honor once again to Yahweh Elohim. We give all praise and honor to him for my wife, the Honorable Alma, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And we thank you so much for supporting her, and even what she does as far as not just the tinctures and the medicine that she has for the community, but also the nonprofit stuff she does, including feeding people and clothing people. So we thank you once again, and we honor you guys, and we thank you so very much for spending some time with us. We want to take some time out tonight and talk about the fact that it is no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable to not know who you are. Now, I'm not trying to come against anybody today. And how you doing, Minister Lex Shante, Brother Steve, and everybody who's listening. I'm not coming to say this tonight to get down on anybody. I'm trying to say this, and how you doing, Sister Kendra? I'm trying to say this from the perspective that a lot of people are frustrated with us because we would dare know who we are. How you doing, Brother Jermaine? A lot of people are frustrated and mad and irritated with us because we would dare know, due to the fact that we've decided that we must know who we are. We must participate in this thing called our culture, and this thing called our story, not his story, but our story. And we take it personally as far as knowing who we are. And there are many people around the world that would have you believe that you are wrong, that you are a reverse racist, that you're a terrible person for simply bringing up the fact that you are outstanding when it comes to your story. And you have to recognize that it is no longer acceptable for us. See, it used to be acceptable. There was a time, see, watch this. We're going back to a time. How about that? We're going back to a time to where you must be aware of who you are. Your very being must be talked about. And when our very being is something that we now decide to talk about, people get frustrated and irritated by that. How dare you talk about this? Why is it? It doesn't matter. That's something that happened hundreds of years ago, but nobody says that about July 4th, 1776, right? Nobody talks about that when they want to bring up the Emancipation Proclamation. How you doing, son of Elohim or Elohim? How you doing? Thanks for being on with us, right? Nobody says that, right? Nobody says that. How you doing, Bounty? Nobody says that when it comes to Columbus Day. Now they mad that we're saying stuff about Columbus Day, but for the longest time you weren't supposed to. How you doing, Sister Mary and Big Brother Thomas? Oh, glad you scrolled as well, Coco. Right? But people are frustrated because we now say there's no excuse for us to not know where we are, where we're from, who we are, what's happened before us, what we should represent, how we should speak, what our languages are. Not even were, but are, because we're starting to speak our own languages. How you doing, Sister Carrie? Like, these are things that people want us to believe that we should feel bad about. People want us to believe that we should feel bad about knowing who we are and whose we are and what community we have and what culture we have. And guess what? The time for us feeling bad about that, how you doing, Sister Deborah? The time for us feeling bad about that, and Shabbat Shalom to everybody coming on, those days are over, right? It used to be that you could kill somebody and that we were so messed up about ourselves. How you doing, Callie? You right on time. Right. We were so down on ourselves that if somebody would kill us for learning, we would say, well, master should, that's, he was trying to be too smart. He was too uppity. Now there is no excuse. We don't excuse that behavior. We don't excuse people talking about themselves like that. We don't excuse people speaking down about themselves like that. How you doing, Lynn? Right? It's no excuse for us, right, to not have knowledge. The word knowledge, to know, literally mean to be intimate with self, right? And I'm here to tell you that that's why people are frustrated. All the stuff people talking about with critical race theory and all that stuff, you know what all that CRT talk is? We don't like the fact that you are going to bring yourself up. How you doing, William? Right? We don't like the fact that you're going to bring you up. Right? Now, if you bring us up and even tell people that we are you, we're okay with that. But don't talk about yourself, and don't talk about where you come from, and don't say anything that brings you up. And then when we bring ourselves up, the whole thing, oh, so you're going to say that we're nothing and we don't have anything? Nobody said you can have your queen. You can have your kings. You can have, I wish you went by it correctly, because just like people of my culture, they don't study their culture enough either. All right. How you doing, Sister Austria? But it becomes this whole thing. Oh, because you're going to declare that you guys are important, you're trying to say we're not important. No, that's not our culture. You have to see in yourself, why do you think that that's automatic? How you doing, Sister Reese? Why is it automatic for you that if I bring up who we are, that means I have to deny who you are? You have to ask yourself, what kind of culture put that in mind that says that if I say I should bring up a Mansa, if I say I should bring up a pharaoh, if I say I should bring up a queen, if I say I should bring up a Netcher, if I say I should bring up Anansi, if I say I should bring up Onyon Capone, if I say I should bring up Khalifa, if I say I should bring up, um, I mean, the list goes on and on. If I say I should bring up a Moroccan king that allowed you to become the United States of America that you become, why is it that when I bring that up, you automatically think it demeans you? The only reason you would think that is because that we would have to tell the proper story, and his story doesn't match up with our story. His story doesn't match up with the story. Hey, peace. How you doing, Smoking? Right? That's the only reason that we have gotten to a position as a people, as a diaspora, to where we have said enough is enough. There's no excuse for us to not know who we are. And here's the real kicker that's messing people up, is that you are no longer our standard. Thank you for the love. That's what's really eating people up. If we want to just keep it 100, all the way 100, right? Keep it a buck. Like, people are frustrated and upset that you are not my standard. If I teach my people, I will teach my people from our standard. And when I do that, I don't have to come to you and run to you and say, are you okay with this? Will you accredit this? Will you honor this? Will you give me a degree of knowledge? Will you say I have a degree of knowledge? And will you go ahead and say those things? Right? You are not my standard anymore. And when you're no longer my standard, you're not in control. That's the issue that people are having. It doesn't matter if we're talking about sovereignty, if we're talking about schism, if we're talking about capitalism, we're talking about classism, whatever you want to talk about, right? If you want to talk about misandry, right? Why do people have a problem when women are speaking up for themselves? They have a problem when women, especially our sisters, are speaking up for themselves, because the sisters are saying we're speaking and you are not our standard. Our standard is greater than you. And if you're not going to get with it, then we're going to tell you what it's about. And we're not going to go ahead and say, and you got all these brothers now that are afraid, oh, they're going to go here, or they're going to do this, or they're going to worship this, or they're going to get into that. Brother, you need to be in a position to where you're worthy of that. You got all these brothers saying, hey, look, sisters, I know you've been saying this, but guess what? Being masculine is no longer toxic. And masculinity is in my culture. I'm not worried about their masculinity. So stop comparing me to the patriarchy. My masculinity, my culture's masculinity declares certain things. See, in our culture, masculinity means that I don't hit women, right? So don't tell me that's toxic masculinity, right? That's somebody else's culture. They're no longer our standard. Yeah, people want their opinion to matter so much, right? But we are in an age and time, once again, to where there's no excuse. It is no longer acceptable to not know who you are, to not know where you came from. I know 14th Amendment citizenship is in your mind. Thanks for being part of the community. I don't know if it's Sugwap or Sogwap. I apologize for misrepresenting that or mispronouncing. How you doing, Sharon? Thanks for being part of the community, right? As well. It's our standard. We get to say, this is what this is who we are. We get to be the ones to say, I can attach myself to Kemet. I know what chemistry means. Thanks for being part of the community, Lynn. I know what chemistry means. See, it used to be I didn't know for sure. I didn't know that chemistry was chemistry. I didn't know that there was melanin that had selenium in the center. There was melanin that had sulfur in the center. I didn't know that the pituitary gland and everything is what's causing some of this stuff and the vibrations, and that if I can get the vibration correct, then I can go ahead and have better education. And how you doing, Brother TJ, if I didn't say so already? I might not have been aware, but now that I'm aware, and I realize that stuff came before you, and I realized literally you flipped the map upside down before you projected it falsely. When I know that you're lying to me, you lost the ability to be my standard. See, had you at least given me a little more truth, it wouldn't have been so obvious. But now that I comprehend who I am and where things come from, why would I keep following a standard that's hypocritical? It's literally hypocrite. Here's the criteria, and you're hypo. You're beneath it. You ain't a hypercrite. You're not even a crite. You're a hypocrite. You live beneath your own standards. How you doing, Sister Beverly? Shabbat Shalom, peace be upon everybody tonight, or this really technically the beginning of the day, if you will, from our cultural perspective. I'll leave that there. How you doing, Brother Clem? You've been speaking to a standard that you don't live by. You hear what I'm saying? You've been speaking to a standard that you don't even live by. Why would I live by it? And then when I come to find out that that standard is not even yours and you messed it up, why don't you tell the people the truth about Alexander the Great? He wasn't African, but he dang sure wasn't what you call European. Why don't you tell the truth about him? Why don't you tell the truth about your King Leonidas? He wasn't African, but he dang sure wasn't what you would call European. Why don't you tell the truth about Cleopatra? She was an African, but she dang sure wasn't European. You hear what I'm saying? Like, that's why they cannot be our standard. Our standard has to be greater than that. And your standard is even greater than yourself. See, get back to the standard. People are so busy overstanding that you don't even realize the word understand doesn't mean that you are scared and you get walked on. Understand means there's a standard. The word standard, it refers even to a flag. There's a flag, right? Right? The red, the black, and the green. There's a standard. And your standard is no longer ours. And it frustrates people, makes them upset that we would dare say that we will dictate for ourselves. People get upset and frustrated when I say, hey, man, when you talk about Darwin, you got to talk about Carl Linnaeus. People don't want to have that conversation. Why? Because I got to tear down the Linnaean standard in order to talk about, or if I tear down Darwinism, really I have to tear down Carl Linnaeus. If you don't know who Carl Linnaeus is the first person to start saying, hey, we're separating races or even species of human beings to be able to say that certain people on top, certain people on the bottom. Now, Charles Darwin writes a book literally called The Origin of the Species, The Theory of Evolution, by natural selection or by the the struggle and survival for favored races. The preservation of favored races through the struggle for life. If you're going to read about Darwin, and it says in the parentheses, still on the title, still on the cover of the book, it then tells you that if you're going to read the rest of it, you got to notice that he's supported by royalty. He's supported by those that are into geography, so people who are messing with geography, and he's supported by those who are Linnaean. Carl Linnaeus said that, hey, because you're black, you're on the bottom. If you're African, you're the worst. If you're certain Europeans, you're on the top. And Charles Darwin took it to the next level, said, I'll go ahead and classify everybody, and I'll tell you how all these different races or species actually evolved from different animals. That's what he taught. Yeah. You don't want to, you tell me about Beethoven, you want me to learn his music, but you don't want to talk about the fact that they called him nappy-headed. You talk about Meghan Markle, but you won't talk about Queen Catherine, who was married to King George. Right? That's who was in place, 1776. You talking about me. And you can't have me. Therefore, they had 11 children married in all these different European countries. So you can't talk about any royalty that's European without talking about my bloodline. Yet when I bring it up and say, hey, include me in your discussion, you say, why bring that up? It's old, you're reverse racist, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't make sense. It's not sensical, right? If it don't make dollars for my people, so it dang sure don't make no sense. Well, people will try to say that about George Washington, when I can tell you for sure, right? Because that one's up for debate. But what I can tell you for sure is that George Washington's wife was a brunette, right? Look up what brunette meant, even in the 1800s in dictionaries still. A brunette didn't mean you just had dark hair. Brunette meant that you had Negroid features. In other words, George Washington's wife, because of classism, she could pass. So she was able to get up high enough and pass enough that she can go ahead and marry George Washington. But they knew that his wife was even part black. So even the whole thing, as far as our story, it's not, we even got to chill out as far as color versus color, because this classism thing got us all over the place. Now, we don't know. How you doing, Leo Nation? How you doing? Is it Mill on Hearts? I'm not sure if I said that correctly. Million Hearts, I'm not sure. But thank you for being part of the community. Right? Like, what is the standard? Why do you get to be the standard bearer? When do we get to be the standard? Why do I have to keep talking about the father of modern medicine and stuff, when Imhotep was doing that stuff thousands of years ago? I know who the father of medicine is, as far as what you call it. Why is it that you won't admit that we all have different blood types? And therefore, when we say all these people have high blood pressure, not all of them have high blood pressure. Said truth is the standard? Exactly. So if somebody lying to me about me, and I keep finding out that they're lying, then obviously their standard when it comes to me is not truth. Why is it that they never told you that Squanto, whose real name was Tisquantum, was a slave? And he was sold to a Spanish family and then to an English family, and then was able to make his way back. And that's why when the Europeans got back, he could speak different languages. That's why he had a Sambo spirit, and he actually tried to betray his own people to get him sold. You said thousands of years ago, for real, no one knows the truth about what was buried. Okay. How far should we go? How far back do you want to go before we keep saying we shouldn't pay attention to things that keep popping up over and over again? I mean, we don't have to go to Mansa Musa. Should we stop at Queen Catherine that we discussed? Should we stop it with Abraham Lincoln wrote out? Should we stop it with people that were born in the 1850s who were recorded in the 1900s for us to be able to listen to what they say? Should we no longer listen to them? I mean, we got them on wax. You said, why are there no slave ruins or pictures? That's not true at all. Go to Monticello and look at where slaves lived, right? Go look at the bottom of the, matter of fact, go up to Baltimore and the ship that the person that you know from the movie, who they call Kunta Kinte, right, in Roots, go up to Baltimore. There's a whole museum made out of the ship that he was on. You said 80 years at best. So that's the only thing you're willing to accept. So don't accept the stuff that's in the footage that they have. Don't accept pictures that people have. Don't accept the accounts that people do, right? Well, at the end of the day, fine, then nothing matters. If nothing matters, then, I'm not at that point in my life where I feel like nothing matters. You said you're not going to go to Baltimore? Okay, fine. Because Baltimore, apparently all of Baltimore's in ruins. Supposedly, I guess that's the mindset of that. But I'm just saying, you're saying that stuff doesn't exist. You could easily go. How about the fact that there were freedmen who were freed, who built churches, and on the side of churches, they built things that were Hebrew characters, West African, North African at the time, people who had scattered from the original place where Yashville or Israel was. You can go look that up. Why not go to Indiana? Why not go to Illinois and look at pyramids that have African writings in them? That European people, not myself, will say, go and look at yourself to be able to, and they say it dates back to well before Columbus came over. Why not do something as simple as study etymology and try to figure out why Mexico is called Mexico, right? And has an X sound in it, when in Spanish there is no X sound, which means now you got to figure out who the natives were, and we know who they were, and we know what they looked like, and we know who they mixed with. Not all of them were black, but some of them were very dark. Black being relative. You said you live in Baltimore? Yeah, I have property in Baltimore. I go to Baltimore quite often. So But, I'm just saying you could go there. I'm giving you a list of places you can go, but people want to keep saying, oh, I only know 80 years ago. That's the same mindset that just says we'll ignore evidence. Well, Haitian voodoo or voodoo, which voodoo, by the way, was a mixture of a bunch of stuff. They just use voodoo. Voodoo, by the way, voodoo and voodoo, the original voodoo from West Africa is not the same as the voodoo that they use, but they just mix and match a bunch of stuff together. It was the rallying cry, to be able to make sure that they were freed and freed themselves in the early 1800s. So, yeah, of course it's demonized. You said you want to go back 10 years? Okay, go back 10 years. Are you more than 10 years old, though? Should I only go back 10 years? Are you more than 10? It's crazy. Watch this. Why do you speak the language that you speak? When people say we should just leave it alone, blah, blah. Why do you speak the language that you speak? The language that you speak tells you who you are, because every language speaks to who somebody is. You're older than 10? Okay, so why only go back 10? If your whole thing is to say that doesn't matter, well, guess what? Before you, like, let's say you're 40, 50, 60 years old. I don't know how old you are, right? But before you, somebody informed you on what life was. And before you, somebody else informed them. That's the story of mankind. When you say, no, that's not real, well, you're somebody who's not really willing to look at stuff that you actually experience. Because if you're more than 10 years old, why would you only say that you should live off of what's only 10 years old? That's a very Eurocentric American mindset. And that's not my standard. Not getting on you for that. If that's the standard you want to live, then live by that. I just choose not to. It's not something I have to bow down to. You live in the now? Okay. Where do you live, by the way, if you don't mind my... You don't have to tell me where you live. Tell me a place you've been. Have you ever been to Washington, D.C.? You know why it's called Washington, D.C. in the now? You know it has to do with what happened in the past, right? You know that George Washington, the obelisk, it means he's the father god. That's what the obelisk is. It's actually literally his phallus, his penis coming out of the ground, and the ground is seed. That would be where his testicles are. And then on top of the Capitol building, by the way, learned this from a white person, so this ain't a black versus white thing, right? And then on the top of the Congress building, there's a goddess named Columbia. She's supposed to be Isis. He's supposed to represent present day Osiris. They tell you to separate church from state, but they don't. I know you didn't ask me to bow down, but it doesn't mean I don't have the right to tell you I won't. See, once again, we live in a society today where it is no longer acceptable to not know who you are. Now, if you're telling me it's acceptable for you, that's fine. But I live in a society where I don't have to sit down and be like, hey, well, just because you don't like me going over 10 years doesn't mean it can't be discussed. What does separation of church and state literally mean? Of course, it doesn't literally mean that, but that's what people, never mind. I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. At this point, you're just arguing to argue. And if somebody can't look past 10 years, then I don't need you to tell me what separation of church and state means, because that's something that came into existence way more than 10 years ago. State isn't supposed to F with church. Okay, fine. All right, so state's not supposed to F with church. All right, so why does the state have a belief system set up where nobody's even talking about what I just said? Washington, Father God, Columbia, Mother God, District of Columbia, right there with pyramids in the streets, triangles all over the place, written by, mapped out all over the place. Why won't you talk about the fact that in Washington, D.C., you can get off at George Washington University, which you get off at a stop called Foggy Bottom, because that's where slaves used to live. Still called Foggy Bottom, and you'll find more mosquitoes there than any time you go back to Africa, if you've ever been. Right, you're talking about something and saying why it doesn't matter, but then you live by what matters. These things shouldn't be brought up. Stop talking about a universe, because the word universe means a single spoken sentence, and that's something that people use to describe the universe. So you live in a single spoken sentence. If you don't want to bring it up, only live in the now. You're absolutely right. Don't bring that up. But there's no excuse. See, for a lot of us, there's no excuse for us to not know where we come from. If you're okay with, hey, it only matters what happened 10 years ago, then don't take care of your mother. Don't take care of your father in the now, because, hey, you know they came into existence over 10 years ago. But that's the cognitive dissonance, though, because if they exist today and they existed over 10 years ago, then I have to look at both of them to see the holistic person. Mansa Musa was Muslim, sure. And he accepted many different belief systems. Right? Time is relevant, sure, because culture is relevant. The culture comes out of time. Why do people say to this day? Let's watch something like this. You said, no, he was Muslim. I just said, yes, he was Muslim, and he still accepted many different beliefs. Look up, I can't remember the brother's last name, but a historian who was a Muslim historian who didn't think that Mansa Musa was Muslim enough. First name is Ibn, IBN. Can't remember his last name, but go look up what he has to say about Mansa Musa. Just type in Mansa Musa, IBN, and then look and see what he has to say. He was down on Mansa Musa because he was too accepting of people being able to believe what they wanted. I don't understand what the argument is about. Thank you, Ibn Battuta. Yes. Go look up what he had to say. He wasn't nice about Mansa Musa, but it's where we learn a lot about Mansa Musa. And a lot of people, unlike the person who told him he wasn't great enough, a lot of people look at him and say, oh, wow, that was great that he allowed women to have positions of power, and he allowed people to worship how they wanted to worship, and he allowed people to be human beings, he allowed people to be free, and he made sure that people had much gold, and he built many mosques across Africa and things like that. You said, so why am I using them in the background? Why not? What am I talking about? That there's no excuse for us not knowing where we're from or who we are. By the way, I'm actually part Mali or part original Ghanaian and part modern Ghanaian. So that's why I use them. This is kin, and I have no problem saying where it is. Right? What does him having to be Muslim have to do with us not knowing who we are? You think that there weren't Alpha people, or who you now call Hebrew people? You don't think there were people over there in ancient Ghana? Right. But once again, see what I'm saying? The fight is when you say that it matters to me that I know where I come from. If I know where I come from, now I got to go on the offensive against you. You said, sorry, servants of Christ. Servants of Christ. Christ is where you're using the word. By the way, it's something that I prayed about. The Most High said we can go ahead and use it because most people identify, right? But Yahshua HaMashiach or Yahshua HaMashiach, yeah, talking about the same person. Christos is talking about anointed, right? Now, if you talk about Christianos, now we can have a different conversation. Either way, you're not going to make me feel bad about myself. I appreciate you, though. Even if you seem to be trying to depreciate me, I appreciate you. Christianity is a colonizer idea. Great. I'm not a Christian. That's your assumption. That's where you're stuck. See, I learned about myself before there was I just literally said before there was Cristianos. I know enough about the language of back then and the etymology to know that Cristianos, even at the time of if you believe in the Bible or not, when the time would have been originally it should have been being written, that if you were considered to be Cristianos, right? Matter of fact, it was before they knew about the Bible, there were Cristianos, they were Christians. That's why the biggest people who worship or do things on Christmas are non-Christians, right? Pagans and witches and all types of people they love. You said, why not be Muslim? First of all, if your whole fight is to make us fight against each other, you ready for this? If your whole goal is like to be like Muslims more powerful, this and that or whatever, I'll tell it like this, and you can just disagree. We'll have to agree to disagree. Isaac and Ishmael are brothers. So Ishmael is my brother. And so I love you. And I'll leave it at that. If that's not a great enough answer, I'm not here for that. I told you, right? That's not my standard. To have us fight against each other, right? At the end of the day, they ain't hanging brothers out here because you Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, whatever, Libertarian Party, etc. They're not. Okay? They're not putting you in prison because you say Abraham or Abraham or Ibrahim. They're not putting you in prison because of your pronunciation. So if that's all it is, and that's the most we can do with it, we can have that conversation maybe some other time, but that's not as important to me. All right, if that's where we're going to keep on going. So thank you so much, though. And you can keep telling me how wrong I am or whatever in the comments. I appreciate you, though. Even if you depreciate me, I appreciate you. I lift you up, right? That can be my jihad for the night, to lift you up, right? And to make it known and clear to everybody at the end of the day, like, once again, it's not acceptable to not know who you are, right? Nobody in here, right, including if you disagree with me, nobody in here, this is supposed to be a safe space. Nobody in here needs to go ahead and try to bow down to somebody else, this and that or whatever, right? You don't have to listen to this. You don't have to agree with this. I'm not saying if you're evil, if you disagree with this. Heck, I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in. How you doing, Alicia? Thanks for being part of the community or coming on over here, right? I'm not here to do any of that. I'm here to tell you that it's no longer acceptable. And when you start declaring who you are, and see, a lot of us, we recognize who we are. We know who we are. I know my bloodline. See, there are some people that can't even say that. I can at least give you enough to be able to tell you that this person get from this person that eventually gets me over the water to here, and I've been back enough to know who I am. You said religion was created by man to separate his brothers and sisters. Religion was not created by God. Well, first of all, I don't worship God. God is a Germanic deity. But I can get what you say, right? Like, if you're using that particular standard, right, that the Most High doesn't use religion, but the word religion simply means a legion of people that repetitively do the same thing. If you drink coffee, you religiously drink coffee, because a lot of people do that. If you run every rising, when the sun comes up, you do so. A lot of people do it. It's religious, right? I'm not worried about your religion as far as what you want to call yourself. I'm worried about your religion as far as how does it affect the community. Right? Well, I can study mine because I literally have people who told me where I come from. Like, I know my grandmother, Taino roots, being tied to Omekshi as well, out of whack, some people want to call it, and then knowing the root that actually from there, her generations coming from Shwe, right? Or modern Ghana, right? And so I actually can say, yeah, I come from this and that or whatever. And say he was a Moor, okay, fine. He wouldn't have called himself that, but at the same time, like, I get what you mean. By then, like, the whole Moors having the power that, the whole Moorish dynasty and stuff, that's done 1491. Mansa Musa's not at the same time. But I get what you mean. And I have no problem being called a Moor. Not all Moors believe the same exact thing, but Moors move together. And that should be the point. You know what I'm saying? It's like, my standard is not to break us up. My standard is come back together. Learn of yourselves and learn of many cultures that you have, right? You're not just one thing. We're not a monolith. I recognize that. Like, I might have my personal structured things that are my life that you might want to call religious or whatever, right? But I recognize the main thing is the main thing. I recognize fully that the main thing is the main thing. I recognize that watch this. See, somebody's so busy talking about Muslim versus Christian, which I'm not even a Christian, but somebody's so busy trying to then say, oh, you got to be like every Hebrew Israelite. They call me a black Hebrew Israelite. That's, by the way, a CIA tactic to name us something so they can try and say we're dangerous. So I've never called myself that, but if that's what you want to say. But you're so busy about Muslim versus Christian and all this other stuff. But guess what? If there's a Muslim boy out there and he needs help, I'm going to help him. It don't matter, right? If there's a Christian little girl out there who's shivering in the cold, I'm gonna make sure that she's warm and that she's taken care of, and try to find her parents. It don't matter if we pray the same way, right? We go into the wrong thing. Knowing yourself doesn't mean separating yourself. I don't care what your religion is, what you want to call yourself. If your whole goal is to say that you're more high-minded or better or more deserving of something than somebody else, and you won't help somebody else, or you'll come and try to dictate to somebody every single thing that they should do in their lives, and you don't even get what this life is as far as a human being. Right? I don't care if you agree with me. If I got $50 and I know your family is struggling and can't eat, I'm gonna make sure they eat. I mean, what we talking about? You know what I'm saying? I'm saying there's not an excuse for knowing yourself. Your higher self demands that you take care of others. See, watch this. You talking about something different. See, even when the people are trying to get into spirituality or the pneumatical thought of things and stuff like that, let's keep this above, right? Maslow's Maslow's pyramid or Maslow's hierarchy. I'm sorry, I'm misrepresenting what it is. Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something like that, right? Whatever it's called, right? At the top, self-actualization. Stop worrying about the physiological. Well, physically, I wear this, and physically, you better wear the fringes, and physically, make sure your ankles aren't covered, and physically, make sure that you say this, and physically, say these specific words, and blah, blah. That's on the bottom rung. If that's what you're arguing, you're not even close to actualizing who you are. Know thyself. There's no excuse anymore to not know yourself. And because we have demanded as a people, as a diaspora, that we know ourselves. I know on paper Don't call me black on paper. Don't call me African American. Don't call me colored. Don't call me Negro, because I know that's an artificial person according to somebody else's law. But in my people, you can call me Kimmy or Kemet or black or Ethiopian black burnt by the sun or slippery black West Coast or Ham, which literally means hot, or can take the heat because of skin color, or even humus man, dark, rich, nutrient earth with a spirit inside. Whatever definition you want to define me as, I'm okay with being that. But that's just the physiological. That's not the utter that's not, that didn't even really have, that's the beginning of knowing who you are. Right? Like that's the beginning of knowing who you are. Y'all don't think because like you think there's going to come safety because you're black, you work in the opposite way. You think it physiological, and you think because of that now, all right, I can be safe because I'm around black folk. Not all black folk, not all kin folk is skin folk. A lot of them, they got a Sambo mind, or what you might call an Uncle Tom mindset. Right? Shoot, Hebrew, what is it? Romans chapter 9, verse 6. Doesn't it say that not all Israel is Israel? Get off your high horse. There's a lot of Israelites out here that you shouldn't trust. You think that because Obama looked like you, that you should trust him? But you into the physiological, you arguing over stuff that don't even matter. You're in the physiological. You think that you're safe now, but you really don't have nothing to belong to because you're so busy ripping yourself apart. That's that Willie Lynch stuff out there. And now you can't esteem yourselves and you'll never get to who you actually are. But work that thing backwards. Work that thing from self-actualization. Who are you? I said this earlier today. Can you tell me who you are without telling me? I'm going to add an extra one on there since everybody wants to argue some of these things that don't matter. Let me add an extra one on there. Can you say who you are without saying your name, without saying if you're married or not, without mentioning your children, without saying your skin color, without saying your job, without saying your religious belief? Can you say who you are without doing any of those things? Somebody says, who are you, Kofi? All right. Hey, I change lives one mind at a time by being a voice to the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. I make sure that I go across the diaspora, making sure that people have a chance to be their higher self. I make sure that people can go ahead and be educated and not have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and go into debt, but they can get a degree via donation. We're making sure that people love themselves and honor each other. We're not teaching people that they're better just because of their color, but we're teaching them it's okay for everybody to be their color and everybody to be addressed as a human being. Right? Can you do those things without having to go through all the stuff that everybody else tells you to argue? Once again, I'm not here to argue over these things. I know myself. I don't have to argue myself with anybody. I just told you myself. People get upset when you talk about yourself, and that's the problem. Your brothers and sisters get upset when you talk about yourself because yourself is a threat to the system that they work in. They live in a system that's against everything they stand for. But hey, they better than the other Negroes, so that's how you measure against each other. You measure against a black person or a Negro or a Moor or a native person or an indigenous person or whatever you want to call yourself, a freedman, a sovereign, a non-citizen national, whichever term you want to give yourself. You argue against each other all day and night. Right, exactly, because they can't define you by their standards. But watch this, is not even our standards. Once again, know thyself, y'all. Why are we comparing by what somebody else said? So because somebody has in their law that being black means you're not a real person, we should think that being black means I'm not a real person. Where they do that at? Why are we arguing against each other with that? Fine. Make sure that when it comes to their court cases and their law and their paperwork, you got that taken care of. But amongst ourselves, we can be ourselves. I would never ask an Irish lass to be afraid to never write down on paper that she has red hair, especially when she's in her own home. See, but we're in the land of our captivity still. You captivated by somebody else. Right? Why are you captivated by somebody else? To be captivated is to be held captive. You're amused by all this other stuff, right? But amuse literally means muse means to think. So if you're amused, you don't think by definition. See, and things in our culture, they were fine, but somebody else defined them. That means they broke down what was fine, and now they've redefined it so many times that you don't even recognize what's yours and what's not. Stockholm syndrome, exactly, right? Willie Lynch stuff. He told you that's what they were going to do. And he said, we're not worried about the first generation where you come from, where they still have semblance of who they are. They said they're worried about everybody born. But if we do this faithful for 1 year, he said, they'll do it to themselves for at least 300, if not thousands of years. And here you are, still arguing about stuff that don't matter, standards that aren't yours. So busy telling me about the Moors, this and that. Speak Moorish to me. You know how they say that? It's so weird when they do that. Where's black? What language is black? What country is black? Okay, fine. Speak Moorish to me. Oh, well, I speak Moroccan. You know, in Morocco, they have tons of languages. And that was well before they had all these other people that aren't even you that are there now. Right? We on some foolish stuff. We're fighting over stuff that's not real. To everybody not supposed to make it. We have to just plant seeds of knowledge. Yeah. And that's all I can do is plant a seed. That's why I said it's not my goal. See, watch this. I know, and this might hurt my people, right? But I say this often in many different ways. Let me say it in a couple different ways so you get the perspective. Let me say it first in the way that might hurt some people's feelings. I'm not here to save all black folk because I can't. It's not possible for one person to try and save every black person, right? It's not my job to save, but watch this. It's also not my job to save everybody in the world because people got to come out the world. That's their choice. The word world, by the way, cosmos with a K, meaning the system of things. That's not my responsibility. You know what my responsibility is? My responsibility is, hey, I got some tools over here. And this is how you can do things to better yourself. And if we use these tools together as a society, we can grow. And it's not wrong to gentrify, but we should gentrify if it's our community. But we got to have our community. Stop talking about your community as the hood, because if you don't own the hood, and if you don't own the stores, and if you don't own the revenue, and if you don't own the vehicles, then it's not yours anyway. So that shouldn't be your standard. If it's not yours anyways, then it's not yours. If it's not your school, then it's not your education. We talked about this a little bit ago, right? Whose dark ages? Whose dark ages are we talking about? How you doing? I don't know how to do it. Was it Wayland? Is it Waylandy? Wayland? I don't know how to say it. Waylandy or Wayland Utinic. I don't know how to say it. I apologize, but they're being on, right? Like if it's not yours, then why you arguing over it? It's not your standard. It's not your standard. Their medicine is not designed for you, right? Formula is a terrible thing, not just because it's causing children not to breastfeed, but formula is not built for everybody. It's built for little white newborn males. So guess what? Little white newborn females, they're not getting stuff they need out of formula. And by the way, the breasts of a woman, right? The breast milk of a woman that comes from the breast and the glands and everything like that, the body literally changes the milk to give the baby what it needs where it is. Formula can't do that. It's just one thing. Right? But you carrying something that doesn't belong to you. It's not yours in the first place. Right? So I'm done with carrying stuff that doesn't belong to me. If that offends people, it offends people. But I'm done carrying items that do not belong to me. Right? Your modern father of medicine is not mine. Imhotep is mine. I don't mind listening to him. Right? Your first person to do brain surgery, doing it back in Kemet, sir. Thank you. You're a person who says that they're doing C-sections. Now they do so many C-sections that in some places in South America, they don't even know how to do natural births in some hospitals. But the original C-section that was only used in emergency situations, they found that out how to do that in the 1800s from people in Uganda. Right? Like it's not my standard doesn't have to be yours. There's no excuse. In our culture, in our community, there are some of us that are rising up that are saying that there's no excuse for us to not know who we are anymore. I'm not driven by what somebody else says I am, and should have never been. But guess what? I came from a culture where they tricked me. They even tricked my family. My family knew where we came from, yet they never would really tell me because they were so busy trying to say, hey, fit in, get the degree, act like an American, do this, do that, or whatever. And interesting enough, I stopped having to work a 9 to 5 when I said I'm going to be myself and take care of my community. right? When I decided I was going to, when I decided that my standard didn't have to be yours, and that I could still make it in my own standard, and then I didn't have to worry about having the clean cut haircut and all that stuff, because I did the military thing. I was disobedient to my culture. I cut this. In my tribe, we're not supposed to cut this, but I said, let me be like Americans. Let me make sure that I fight for this country and die for it. And you know, when I fought and died for it, people still said the same stuff about me then. Even when I was speaking all the right things and voting and doing all the things they told me, people said the same thing about me then, even when I was in uniform, that they do now. What do I do now? I teach. I teach. I work on activism. I'm a helot. Some people would call it a pastor, but it's not really the same thing. I assemble people together, and praise Yah, like people give donations to the organization that I'm part of, and my wife has her business and stuff as well, of natural medicine and things, and living our lives more than takes care of the bills. So what you see me doing now, in essence, is what I do all day with my family or otherwise. My family by blood or by relationship, or, you know, even a stranger on the street. You know, but I'm just telling you, like, that standard that causes us to fight and to hate each other and to hate on each other and to dislike things and to do this and to do that and all these different things or whatever. Like, you know, I'm done with that, man. You know, I'm done with that. Like you can't allow people, you know, even people like, what do you do? Or what do you do? Where do you come from? Where do you live? Blah, blah. Like, what does it matter? Like, are you gonna, even if I told you what I did, would you help me? Like, we're trying to get land. Would you help put in on that so we could own our own land and make sure we're growing our own food so that our people can eat? Even if, you know what I'm saying? Like, even what's the purpose of the question? We're so against each other that we question just for the sake of questioning. I'm gonna find a question that's gonna break down everything that this sister or brother is saying. Like, for what? Anyways, my wife has to teach herbalism too, so I'm gonna roll out. Thank y'all. I appreciate it's time for me to take my leave. If y'all want to have more conversation like this, we can pick this back up tomorrow. Whether it be on Kofi_43, if you're on TikTok, if you're on YouTube, same time, or same channel, but rather different time. But we're on every rising 8 a.m. Eastern New York time. We're on every weeknight 8 p.m. Eastern New York time, except for Wednesdays. Wednesday's my day off. However, next week I will not do Wednesday rising, but I will do a Wednesday evening session, because come Friday evening, since we're going to be meeting together in Detroit, I will not have the opportunity to be on in the evening. So next week, if you want to join us on Wednesday night, join us on Wednesday night. We thank you guys. We appreciate you. I'm excited. It looks like we got our baptism stuff kind of tied up together and everything. And praise Yah, things are working and things are moving and we're growing. And we're doing some great things. So we honor you guys. We're thankful for you guys. We appreciate you. Even those who disagree, whatever, we still appreciate you. I told you, even if you depreciate, we appreciate. And so we have mad love and respect for you and your humanity. And thank you for asking those questions. Continue to be great. And know that the more you question, the more you do those things, the more I rejoice. Because as long as I'm doing it for the correct reasons, the righteous reasons, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to be righteous. And if you get on me because of righteousness, then I love you for that. All right. So I appreciate you. Thank you. Those who got herbalism too, please check out the Honorable Alma. She's pretty much ready to go now. It's time for me to take my leave. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Hold on. Oh. Okay, sorry about that. Alma was sending me a message. I thought it might have been a message for everybody. She was just sending me a message. Okay. So thank you. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you later. Shabbat Shalom again to everybody. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern New York time. And if you got class, we'll see you in a few minutes. As always, it's been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken, until I have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of talking to you all again. Please remember, Yashua, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Peace, y'all. Thank you.